Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Kalopsia podcast. I'm your host, Sydney, and thank you for joining me today. Again, happy Friday. And if you're new here, this is just a little pod that we've got where we just talk about anything under the sun, essentially anything that tickles my fancy, sometimes advice, sometimes rants, anything really goes. So, thank you for joining me today. And today I wanted to talk about something that's been ruminating in my mind all week, which is beliefs and kind of religion, but mostly centered around the universe and with a what is it called? A specificity in the like astrological genre. If that made any sense to you. So basically this week I discovered this concept called the human design chart, and this was like a revolutionary topic to me. I was like, what is this? Why have I not heard of it before? And it kind of got me thinking about how curious we are, as people about why we act the way we do. And it could be more specific to me because I am a behavioral neuroscience major and I study a lot about the brain and behavior, so it would make sense for me to be interested. But this is definitely something I feel like a lot of people can relate to because I feel like we all remember doing those BuzzFeed quizzes, like which character are you? Which faction are you from? Which type of, person are you, like erudite, dauntless, like all of those. Like which are you? Like that was always like a running theme. And we have this like deep curiosity about what makes us the way we are. And when I think about that, right, the next thing that pops into my head is astrology and how it depends about if you believe in it or if you don't. But like astrology has been around for a really, really long time and even has been used by like politicians and, scientists. And, it really is up in the air about whether or not it's really true. But the reality is that it's like a statistical pattern that tends to happen when people are born around a certain time. And it has a lot of elements of astronomy that go into it as well, which adds to its validity in my eyes. So when I think about myself, right, and I look up all of these things about astrology, I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it kind of does. Yeah, it kind of doesn't. Yeah, whatever. Like you pick and choose what you really want to validate and what you don't. And obviously that's going to include judgment, like self-judgment and bias. But it's really interesting when I hit this human design thing because the whole thing about astrology too, like within the whole space, the whole realm, is that there's a lot of like judgment and shame in it. I don't know if you guys have also noticed this too, if you have talked about it before, it's like, oh, you're this sign, like that means you're crazy. Like, oh, you're that sign, like that's even wilder. Like, oh, you're this sign, scary, like that's kind of the air that tends to have around it, right? But when you think about this human design, which I don't even know if I've explained properly, I will do so now. Essentially, and I'm gonna butcher this because I'm not that proficient in it, but I somehow found myself in a manic spiral searching up like my chart and looking at all the details of it for literally like 3 hours, like a few days ago. Like it was I hadn't eaten like 10 hours, almost fainted, like the whole nine. But, I basically threw myself into this world. So I can tell you what I've learned in my like 4 hour spiral. Basically, at the time you're born, you have what you already know about your chart, right? Whatever moons, whatever the sun at the time that you were born, blah, 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 your sun sign, your rising sign, your moon sign, north node, all of these things. But then in the human design chart, there's this other element where it's like, okay, 88 days before you were born, you had these other signs that were putting in their 2 cents into your personality, basically. But basically, it will draw an unconscious side or side, and then you also have the conscious side, which is like the personality side. The unconscious side is like what we don't really know about, but that we eventually will see its influence, later on in our lives. And then the human design chart, it goes even further than those two sides and, seeing whatever was at play at the time, right? It also delves into, what is your personality type. And there's like 4 major types and then like little subtypes. And then you have like a profile and you have your pains and your gains or whatever. And you have all of these essential energetic like gates. It's honestly so much to explain. But the concept of it was so interesting to me because it just points to how curious we are as people about what makes us the way that we are and what makes us think the way we do and what makes us act the way we do. And it's so interesting to me that, this chart was invented and it's not even that old per se. It's from the 90s or whatever. But something that I really could appreciate about it is that not only was it quite accurate, but it was also very non judgmental. And I'll leave it at that with the human design chart because it really does depend on, whether you want to delve into that or not, just as is the case with, astrology. But this whole conversation in my mind kind of led me to thinking about the whole concept of religion because I think I wanted to talk about this like a year ago. And I grew up Catholic and, well, actually, I was baptized Presbyterian, but then was Catholic and then had my confirmation, all of that. And I really enjoyed church. I thought it was really nice, like in my eyes, I had a really good experience. I didn't necessarily have like, trauma in any way, within the church or anything like that. Like for me, it was a good experience. But when COVID hit and my mother had left the country for like a year and I was bouncing around and then I ended up going to college. And then in college, it was like COVID, everything was shut down. I wasn't really going to church of my own, volition or of my own initiative. And so I kind of just stopped going to church. But I feel like my belief, in essence, never like went away, if you will. But I've thought a lot about how many religions we have, right? And how many people think that theirs is the one. You'll have the Catholics, you'll have Jewish, you have Islam, you have so many different religions. Like I actually can't even sit here and count them all because I know maybe five total. But I think it's so interesting as humans that we still have this tendency, millions of years later, not millions, how long have humans been around? I don't even know. But we still have this tendency to want to root ourselves in a certain belief, almost as though we're trying to make sense of what our existence is, purpose is. And I feel like that's kind of the running trend. And if this is an opinion piece, right? This episode, in my opinion, I feel like we're all kind of leaning in the same direction and we all want to believe the same thing, right? But then culture comes in and blends into the belief aspect, and then you get pulled into different directions, and it becomes like an us versus them, and then it becomes a comparative of the different religions and belief systems, and then you add shame into the mix and hierarchies into the mix. And I feel like that's where the problem arose. And I feel that there's no right or wrong belief or religion in my eyes. It's just that so much has become intellectualized, and that's where we kind of suffer and distance ourselves from what the core of religion really is, because at the end of the day, it's you acknowledging a higher power or acknowledging another essence's influence on whatever is happening for you here in the present moment today. There is, if you do believe, right, I feel like the running trend is that, okay, there's something else out here that's, playing a role. It isn't just me. And none of this is going to make sense, like, in its entirety to me. Like, I'm not going to understand everything that comes my way. I'm not going to understand every hardship that comes my way. A lot of it is not in my control. And, the way that I see it is like the universe is at play. And that universe term can look different across the world. It can look different across a city. You have different opinions, different perspectives. But at its root core, it kind of becomes the same thing. And I feel like that's kind of what's happened as of late, when Emma Chamberlain actually talked about it in an episode about a year back. I think it was about last winter or spring, something like that. She released an episode also called Religion, in which she kind of spoke about how humans yearn for something to root themselves in. And I very much agreed with her. I feel like that is definitely the case because if you have nothing to root yourself in. At least this is my opinion, you guys. Totally my opinion. You can believe your own opinion, and we're all entitled to our own opinions. But I feel like if you have nothing to root yourself in, it can be kind of an uncomfortable space, energetically. I feel like energetically, it's almost as though you're anchorless. You have nothing to root yourself in, nothing on which to stand on when you're in distress, nothing with which to celebrate or to thank or be in gratitude to when you have a win or when you have an amazing thing that happens in your life. We all yearn that kind of pillar on which to lean on. And that can look different in so many ways. But I feel like the new wave that's, recircling is astrology and it is human design and that type of thing. Because it all goes into that same vein of like searching for that why. Why are we here? Why should I be happy for this? Like, why should I suffer? Why do I act this way? Why do I behave this way? Like, always the why? And I just thought it was really interesting because I hadn't made that connection before, between religion and astrology and, the universe, if you will. But it makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of sense why it would resurface, again and again and again. And you can choose to not believe in anything, obviously. But I find that, at least in what I've observed from the world, is that kind of fluctuates, over time. I find that a lot of people say, like, I don't, I don't believe in anything or whatever. But then, you'll say things like, I'll just put trust in the universe. Like these little sayings that we say, they kind of do reflect what we're saying to ourselves, deep inside, because words have so much power, more power than we realize. So I just think it's really interesting to become kind of attuned to that and attuned to how collective this experience is. Me being so hyper focused on this human design chart the other day, like that, it's not a unique experience, and it's really making me feel very interconnected and connected with this whole why are we here, and the whole obsession, not obsession because that kind of makes it seem negative, but the weight that we put on religion and belief systems and beliefs, because it is at the end also very collective and very connective. I don't know if that's a word, but it makes us. I can only think of the word in French. It like nous relie. It's like nous relier. Basically, it's like bringing us together. So I thought that was really interesting. And I guess this week's episode is a really quick one. I guess I just wanted to pop in with my little thoughts of the week. But I hope everybody's having a fantastic day. Little update. I have had an expired passport and an expired ID since my birthday. Actually, my ID expired on my birthday, and my passport expired in May of this year. So I have no identification. And the kicker is, I can't apply for a passport if I have an expired ID, and I can't apply for an ID if I have an expired passport. But I met the kindest soul at the post office today. He was like, I'm going to be here tomorrow. Come tomorrow. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I was like, oh, God, thank you. So, yeah, that's what I did today. Took my passport photos, bit the bullet. It was really, like, I don't know what it is about these things where I, like, build up the task so big in my mind that it becomes impossible to complete. Impossible to complete. And I guess that's the essence of procrastination. But, oh, my God. Like, today, it was such a high-stress situation. I'm like, why is my cortisone going so high? Like, for nothing. Literally for nothing. It's not as though I'm going to go and fight to the death in the Hunger Games or anything like that, I was like, why am I so anxious? Like, I can't do this. But it ended up being fine. And hopefully I'll get the application in tomorrow. I'll be a lot poorer. But, that's the name of the game. That's just the trade, essentially. But I hope you guys all have a fantastic rest of your week. I finished my fall semester. So I got basically 10 days of break. I'm just kidding. It's not 10 days, but it feels like 10 days. It feels like my break is this long, but that's okay. That's okay. It's the last semester. So keep our eye on the prize. But yeah, now I'm just rambling because I wanted to talk for longer because I feel like I didn't talk enough. But I feel like that's just the way it goes sometimes. I don't want to talk and just talk for absolutely nothing, even if, I mean, if you guys do enjoy that, do let me know. But I think I'll cut it off now. You can follow the pod at Kalopsia Pod on Instagram and TikTok, and Sydney Jotita at Instagram. At Instagram. That's not what I meant to say. On Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. And it has been a pleasure having you on the pod today. Bye.